So today we're going to be showing you guys at home how to change this radiator
to a vertical radiator like this.
So your first job when commencing any work is turning off your boiler, and Phil's going to explain why.
So because we're replacing this radiator with a slightly narrower, we're going to be changing the pipework. That is the reason we need to shut our boiler off, because we're going to be draining the system down and moving the pipe. So that's going to be our first job. So let's go switch that off and get ready to drain this down. Right, so we're at our boiler. As you can see, it's still on, it's got pressure. Pretty standard combination boiler here, and what we're looking for is a fuse spur like this, normally located near the boiler, and we want to switch that off. The reason we switch them off is when you drain them down, you can cause a fault on the boiler, and we don't want to do that, so we just shut them off while we're working on the system.
So now that you've isolated your boiler, the next job is to drain your system. And how you do that, you have to go to the lowest point in your property and look for something that looks like this, and that's actually called a drain valve. And what you need to do is grab a hose pipe, connect it on the end with a Jubilee clamp, open the valve and let the system completely drain. If, like us, you haven't got a drain off, we're going to show you the alternative method.
So our first job on this alternative method is to shut our thermostat. So we're going to turn the dial down to 0. So we've now isolated the flow through the rad on this side. And on the opposite side, you'll find normally something like this. So this little cap, you can turn these sometimes, but rarely, and that will shut this down. But I'm going to show you, if you just pull these off, get yourself some adjustables, and we're going to rotate that clockwise, and that's going to isolate this side as well. So then what this is doing is shutting the water off on these pipes. No water can flow through. So now that we've turned that all the way clockwise, basically there's a plunger inside, goes down, and we've capped the water inside the pipe here, so nothing can come out when we remove this rad. If you've got two of these on each side and you haven't got a thermostat, same process, we're just going to turn these clockwise and it caps the water. So now that our valves are both switched off, we're going to get ourselves an adjustable like this. We're going to go onto the nut next to the valve, doesn't matter what side you want to start with, and on this side we're going to be lifting up. And we're not undoing it fully, we're just going to crack it, and we're going to allow the water to just drop down. We've got ourselves a little container, so we've got a bowl or whatever you can get underneath your pipe work, and we put ourselves some protection just to protect your flooring, so some towels, a bag. So we'll keep turning it until we start to see some water, which we're just starting now, and it's not going to run completely out because all we're doing at the minute is draining the rad down, nothing else. So if it doesn't drip, you want to get yourself a bleed key like this, and we're going to open the bleed valve, and that should start the water draining down. So now that we've got our bleed valve open, we're basically stopping any vacuum that may have been inside. If it doesn't flow very well, if you just start to flex the pipe out, because basically it's still slightly sealed, so if we just pull it out, it's a bit of a slow method, but it works. And we're just going to keep doing this until the rad is completely drained down. While you're draining it, if your bowl or your pot or whatever it is you're using to catch the water starts to fill up, don't panic. Just take your nut, tighten it back up, go and empty your pot.
Get your assistant.
Thanks, Brad. And then we put it back underneath and go again. So now that the rad is completely drained, no more water's coming out of the other side, we come to the opposite side, and then we're now going to crack this last nut open. You may get a little bit of residual water left in there, but it's pretty much empty. We're just going to move the pipework out of the way. So now that our valves are both disconnected and the rad or the radiator is now empty, we're going to just unhook it. So it's on a hook system, so we just grab the bottom. You may want to get a couple of if it's a really large rad, and we just lift up. And then we're going to flip it upside down, and it's like a transformer, it falls apart.
Right, now that Phil's got the radiator off the wall, it's time to remove your brackets, and they're usually just held in with a couple of screws. Now that we've completely removed the old radiator, if you was keeping the same width radiator, you'll be able to keep these valves and install your new radiator, but we're actually changing the width. So we're actually going to need to expose the pipework, but before that, we're going to have to drain down the system, and we're going to do that by grabbing a bucket and opening the valves and draining it into the bucket.
Right, the way we're going to be draining it, we get our bucket, we're going to put it on the side like this because this is, unlike the rad, this is going to have some pressure in it. And then we're going to open our valve. As you can see, there's a lot more pressure in the system than when we did the radiator. Until your container's full, if you've got a floor covering that you're going to be keeping, then obviously you want to protect that. Because we've got raw concrete at the minute, we're not too fussed about a little spillage here or there. So we'll keep doing that until the pipework's completely drained away. Right, so both our valves are now fully opened. The water is completely drained away. We've got nothing left in the pipework. So now, because we're moving our rad and we're making it slightly narrower, we need to expose the pipework that's behind this wall here. If it's under your floorboards, same process, you need to pull your floorboards up. So we're just going to use a multi-tool, cut a section of wall out and get to our pipework so we can re-pipe it. So let's do that now. So if you are going to be using a multi-tool to cut plasterboard walls, don't go sending it all the way through, just in case you've got any other services behind there. So I'm just popping through the plasterboard nice and gently. Right, so I've done my vertical line and now going to come across horizontally to remove some of this wall. I'd like to get myself a spirit level, mark an actually straight line rather than just guessing it. It makes it a lot easier to repair when we come to putting this all back. So we've exposed our pipework, as you can see, and luckily we have, because it's an absolute mess behind here. These should never be buried behind walls, so that's an isolator. So what we're going to do, we're going to take our pipe slice, which is one of these, and we're going to cut back to some nice clean pipework. So we're going to cut this there, and we're going to cut this one back here, and get ready to install our new pipework. So the way one of these pipe slices work, we click it over the pipe, and they've got a directional arrow. So we need to turn it this way, and then we just rotate it, and that's what we're looking for. You may get a bit more water because we're slightly lower now, so we'll just put that in a bowl. Right, now that we've cut that one, we move on to the second pipe. Same process, click it on, start turning.
Right, so that's it, we've cut the pipes back. That's as far as we're going for the moment. We're actually going to mount the radiator on the wall, and then we're going to pipe up to it.
So our first step when mounting our radiator is obviously pick a position you want it in. We're then going to put ourselves a level line all the way up the centre of the place you want it. So we just take our level, and that will go from the bottom of the rad to the top of the rad. And the reason we're doing this is going to make your life a lot easier when we're marking out for our brackets. Right, now we've got our plumb line from top to bottom. We need to decide where we want to start the bottom of our radiator. So the way we're going to do that, we're going to measure from the bottom of the rad to the front of our bracket. So we have got 125 millimeters. So we take the bottom of the rad that we want it to be at, and we come up 125 mil. So for us, it's here. We're then going to put ourselves a level line across. And to get the distance between our two brackets, all we do is hook onto one and measure to the same position on the next. So for us, it is 1545. So we're going to measure up 1545 from our bottom mark, and then use our level again, put ourselves a mark. Right, so the one last thing we need to do, and that is to get the centre of our bracket. So a quick tip to do that, if we just measure it, ours is 120 mil wide, we'll put a little pencil line at 60 mil, half our measurement. That means that when we come to mark our brackets, we put our mark on our centre line that we've got on our wall, like so, and we're just going to mark the centre of our fixing holes. So if it's brick, we want to be drilling and putting a plug. Because we've got plasterboard, we're going to use some plasterboard fixings, and we'll show you that right now. We've got ourselves some Fisher plasterboard fixings, so we're going to stick those in our markings. So we'll put all 4 of those in. Right, now that we've got our plasterboard fixings in, we're going to take our screws with our bracket, and then there's a tiny bit of slack in these brackets. We're just going to make sure our centre mark is lined up as we send our screws in. And that is solid. And then we're going to do the same on the top.
So now that brackets are on the wall, it's time to mount our radiator.
Right, now it's time to install our lock shield valves into our radiator.
Well, wait. Before, on this particular rad, there's a coating inside which we have to take off because this stuff is metal to metal reaction. So you want to clear this coating on the inside of the thread. Right, so what you want to do with that is take a small bit of abrasive strip, roll it up, and make sure you get off as much of that coating as you can. So you've got your valve and your tail. Your tail attaches to your valve. We are putting the tail inside the radiator, and we're going to use this rapid blue. So give this a good shake before you open it. Apply it to the first and the second. And make sure you wipe off the excess because that stuff will not come off.
Right, so we've installed our valves. It's now time to start piping up to our new radiator. And all these installs are going to be different. So everybody's pipework is going to need something slightly different. So we're just going to show you some methods of bending and soldering joints so you can use a mixture of what you need for your pipework.
Right, so now we're going to run our pipework into the bottom of the radiator, but we want these tails to come out level. So the bottom pipe will kick up, and I'm going to do that using a pipe bender. We get our pipe, we put it through the guide piece, we grab our former, like that, slight bend, and there's your kick.
Right, your next step is to dry fit all your pipe up to your valves. And what you need to do beforehand is fit these plastic clips to the wall, and that keeps these in place and stops them rocking around. Right, now it's time for you guys at home to dry fit your copper from the valve to the existing pipe.
So to make these sections up, we've got some bends in place, which will give you a tighter radius than using the bender. But behind the wall, we've used the bender, as Pete showed you, to get this gradual upsweep. And what that's done is bring the two pipes out level for us. So cutting your pipe, same as we showed you earlier, use your pipe slice, put it on, turn it around, and you can cut your lengths. Once you've got all your sections, we've taken it back off, and what we're going to do is we're going to prep all of our solder joints. So we'll show you that now. We're going to take it apart. We're then going to use our abrasive pads or strips, and we're going to clean all the joints up, so all the ends of the pipe work. We just wrap it round, give it a little clean.
So no matter how clean you think your pipe is at home when doing this, as you can tell with Phil, if he shows to the camera, we thought it was clean, but this is actually what you're looking for.
It just removes the oxidisation that copper will get. And once we've used our abrasive strips to clean the ends, we're also going to be using a deburring tool. So this is one style, and we stick it in the ends where we've done our cuts. We just roll that round, and that gets rid of any rough copper on the inside of the pipe work. So we just do this on all of your joints, every single bit of pipe work you want to do this. So we'll go around, get all these prepped and show you the soldering process. Right, so now all of our joints and pipe work are prepared. It's time to get yourself some flux, and we're going to be putting the flux around the ends of our pipes like so, all the way around. And we're then going to take our fitting, and as we slide these on, we want to just turn them back and forth a little bit. Just make sure there's flux all the way around, and we're then going to clean the excess flux off on each joint as we go along. And that one's ready to go. So what we're going to do, we're going to clip this into place, and we're going to assemble the rest of the joints in the same manner as we have that one.
So Phil, why do you actually have to clean the excess flux from around the edges?
So for one, it's going to make a cleaner joint, and two, it's actually corrosive to pipework, so we don't want all the excess left on there.
So if you're doing this at home, just make sure that you're following this sort of guide along, dry fit everything in place, get it all prepared, and then we'll get ready to solder it. This bit here, where the valve is, that bit ain't actually getting soldered because it's a compression fitting, and that gets tightened up at the end. Right, before soldering anything, you want to be getting yourself a heat mat, and that actually protects the walls from setting alight and creating fire.
So we've got ourselves a blowtorch, and we've also got ourselves some unleaded solder, which we'll be putting into the joints. So we're going to take our heat, apply it to the joint on the back side, and we're going to touch the solder on the opposite side. So if you just touch it on, you'll see it run around, and that's what we're looking for, the silver ring all the way around. Right, so now that all our solder joints are done, it's time to tighten all of our compression fittings. So we're just going to make sure our pipe's nice and tight, get our adjustables and tighten the nuts like so. You don't have to go crazy with these. We just want to make sure they're tight. And then same with the rad, just tighten these up.
Right, now that all our pipework's all tightened up, it's time to move on to the top of the rad where the bleed valve is. And you'll notice in your radiator that you get one of these bleed valves on one side and a blank in the other. But before we put this blank in, Phil's got something to show you.
Right, so before we finish tightening up our bleed valve and our cap, we need to add some inhibitor. So this style comes with all different fittings, so we're going to add that to the top. And what this is going to do is prevent corrosion in your radiators. So it's going to protect the system, so we want to get this in before we fill it up. So we screw that into the cap end, push our nozzle on. Brad holds the radiator still, I'll put some pressure. And then we're just going to pull the trigger and empty the can into the system.
You might see this rad moving, it's because we ain't put the final clips in because we want to test for leaks first. So don't worry, there is caps being put on either side.
Now that that's in, we're going to put our cap on, which Brad's got in his hand.
These have got rubber O-rings in there, so they're really good at sealing. All we need to do is just nick it up just a slight tad, and that will seal really good.
Right, so now it's time to come back to our boiler and start to top up the system. So what we're going to do, we're going to find our filling loop. All boilers are slightly different, so ours is underneath. So we're going to turn the levers and we're going to put ourselves 1.5 bar of pressure into the system. Right, as you can see, we're up to pressure. So we're going to shut the loop back off. And now it's time to go and make sure we've got no leaks on the rad and start bleeding all of our radiators. Right, now that we've got pressure in our boiler, we're going to go round with our radiator key and we're just going to open the bleed valves until we get water like that. We're going to do that on every single radiator, and then we're going to go back to the boiler, top it up, back up to about 1.2, 1.5 bar, somewhere in that range, and then we're going to switch our boiler on and run it up to temperature.
I hope you've enjoyed this video, guys.
Like and subscribe.
Please! I want to do a little shout out to heatandplumb.com. If you need anything plumbing, heating wise, go check them guys out.